The president of our HOA shoved my daughter up against our gate, blocking her and her service dog from getting inside our own home. She had no idea I was watching the whole thing. She also didn't know I was the assistant commissioner of police. But trust me, she was about to find out what happens when you mess with my kid. The gate pressed hard into Ava's back. Sorry, Emma's back, as this lady, Mrs. Simmons, jabbed her finger at my daughter's chest. Emma's service dog, Duke, was whining beside her, clearly anxious and unable to do anything while this woman stood there, physically blocking their way. I don't care what your dad told you, Mrs. Simmons snapped. No dogs in common areas. It's in bold print in the rules. But your family thinks you're above that, huh? I was sitting in my car, just pulling in from a brutal 14-hour shift. And what I saw sent a bolt of rage through me. My daughter, 14 years old, epileptic, cornered by a grown woman, hands trembling as she clung to Duke's vest. Please, Emma's voice cracked, barely holding it together. Duke's a service dog. He's protected under the Fair Housing Act. Don't you dare throw laws at me. Simmons shouted, shoving her hand harder into Emma's shoulder. I've worked as a paralegal for over 2 decades. That knockoff vest you ordered online doesn't override our rules. By that point, I was already walking up, slow and steady. My voice was low when I spoke, the kind of tone my officers knew meant something bad was about to happen. Get your hands off my daughter. Right now. She spun around, startled, but then she recognized me. And just like that, she seemed smug again. To her, I was just Mike Thompson, the quiet single dad who had some government gig and barely showed up to HOA meetings. Oh, Mike, great timing, she said. I was just explaining to your daughter that her emotional support pet. Patricia, I cut her off, calling her by her first name for a reason. You've got 3 seconds to move away from my kid before I arrest you for assaulting a minor and violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. She let out this shaky laugh, clearly trying to play it cool. Arrest me? You can't be serious. I stepped closer and peeled off my jacket, revealing the badge clipped to my belt and the gun I hadn't even had time to lock up in the car. Assistant Commissioner Thompson, Metro PD, I said, dead serious. And I just watched you lay hands on my disabled daughter and interfere with her service animal. The whole crowd that had gathered went dead silent. Patricia's expression shifted fast, shock, embarrassment, then a panicked scramble to keep her dignity. I didn't realize you were a cop, she stammered. That shouldn't matter, I told her, my tone ice cold. What should matter is that you just broke federal law by blocking a medically necessary service dog from assisting a child with a disability. I turned to the folks watching. Mrs. Jensen, could you walk Emma inside, please? And Mr. Ramirez, since you've been filming this, I'm going to need a copy for my report. Patricia's eyes widened when I mentioned the recording. Wait just a second. No, you wait, I cut her off, stepping closer. For 2 years, I've kept records. Every snide note you've left, every complaint you've made about Duke. And tonight, you crossed the line. You assaulted a kid with a neurological condition. I pointed toward our house. That vest you mocked? It's not fake. It's registered with the Department of Justice. Duke's logged over 1,500 hours of training. Duke, Emma's service dog, had been trained to sense her seizures before they even started. That dog had already saved her life 3 times. When I mentioned that, something in Patricia Simmons shifted. It was like the fight left her face all at once. She finally seemed to realize just how much trouble she was in. The people around us, who'd been standing silent, suddenly began to speak up. She's been picking on that poor girl for months, one neighbor muttered. I raised a hand to quiet the crowd. Mrs. Simmons, go home. Expect to hear from the HOA board, then the police, and finally, my attorney. She opened her mouth like she had something to say, but thought better of it. She turned and walked off fast, her expensive heels clicking across the pavement like gunshots. I took a long breath before facing the neighbors again. Thank you to those who stepped up. And to those who didn't, I hope you'll do better next time. Inside the house, Emma was curled up on the couch with Duke's big head resting in her lap. Her hands were still trembling. Mrs. Jensen had made her a cup of tea and was sitting nearby. She's starting to calm down now, Mrs. Jensen said softly as I came in. "I'll leave you two to talk." After she left, I sat beside Emma. I saw the red mark on her shoulder where Patricia had shoved her. "I'm so sorry, Dad," Emma whispered, her voice barely hanging on. "I was just walking Duke like I always do before dinner." I shook my head gently. "Sweetheart, you don't owe anyone an apology. What she did was not only wrong, it was illegal." Emma ran her fingers through Duke's fur, thinking, "Why does she hate us so much? We've never done anything to her." I'd asked myself that same question more times than I could count. From the moment we moved into this so-called upscale neighborhood, Patricia Simmons had made it her mission to find problems with us. Maybe it was because we were different, me, a single dad, and Emma, a kid with epilepsy. "Some people can't handle what makes them uncomfortable," I told her gently. "Your condition, Duke, it reminds her that life doesn't always follow the rules. And that scares her." Emma looked up at me, her expression sharp. "That's a dumb excuse to be a jerk." I actually chuckled at that, despite everything. "Yeah, it really is." The next morning, I made a few phone calls from my home office before heading to work. And by lunchtime, things were already in motion. 3 days later, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. The community center was packed. Neighbors filled every seat, many of them wearing purple epilepsy awareness ribbons in support. Douglas Walker, the board's chairman, stood up front and opened the meeting with a firm voice. "First, we owe an apology to Emma Thompson and her family," he said. Emma sat beside me, Duke at her feet, calm but alert. "What happened to her and her service dog goes against everything our neighborhood is supposed to stand for," he continued. "The board has reviewed security footage, gathered witness accounts, and looked at the relevant laws. Our vote was unanimous." He paused, locking eyes with Patricia Simmons, who sat rigidly in the front row. Effective immediately, Patricia Simmons is removed from her role as HOA president. The room buzzed with murmurs and nods of agreement. "And," Mr. Walker added, "we will fully cooperate with any legal action the Thompson family chooses to pursue." There was a wave of supportive clapping. But he wasn't finished. "We're also introducing mandatory disability awareness training for all HOA board members. And lastly, we're forming a new accessibility committee. Emma, when you're ready, we hope you'll consider joining us." The rest of the meeting turned into something more powerful than I expected. Neighbors began standing up, one after another, sharing their own experiences of unfair treatment under Patricia's leadership. Our story had just been the tipping point. Afterward, folks came up to us to apologize. One neighbor, Mr. Ramirez, handed me a flash drive. "Here," he said. "My cameras caught 6 different times she harassed your daughter. You'll want this." 2 weeks later, Patricia faced real consequences. The district attorney filed charges, assaulting a minor, violating disability rights, and harassment. With all the video footage and witness statements, there wasn't much she could do to deny it. The judge didn't hold back. She was fined $5,000, sentenced to 200 hours of community service at a disability center, and given 1 year of probation. On top of that, she had to pay for Emma's therapy sessions. Part of Mrs. Simmons' sentence included staying at least 100 feet away from Emma, unless Emma gave her permission to come closer. If she broke that order, she'd be facing jail time. Word of her punishment spread fast through the neighborhood. Most folks agreed it was fair. Even the local paper picked it up, calling it a milestone for disability rights. That evening, Emma stood in the kitchen doorway, thoughtful. "Dad," she said, "I've been thinking about that accessibility committee Mr. Walker mentioned." She gave a small nod. "I want to be part of it. Not just for us, but for other families. What if a kid in a wheelchair wants to live here one day?" I couldn't have been prouder. After everything she'd been through, my daughter was still thinking of others first. "If you're ready for that kind of responsibility, I'll be right behind you," I told her. She smiled, her face full of determination. "I'm ready." A month later, I watched from the porch as Emma walked Duke down the same path where Patricia Simmons had once cornered her. But today, Emma wasn't alone. Walking beside her was Caroline, a bright 9-year-old who used forearm crutches because of cerebral palsy. The two had become fast friends, bonding over their shared experiences. The accessibility committee hadn't wasted time. Gravel paths had been replaced with smooth, wheelchair-friendly pavement. New ramps led up to the clubhouse, and they'd added braille signs throughout the neighborhood. As I stood watching, a familiar car pulled up next to the sidewalk. My muscles tensed. The window rolled down, and out leaned Mrs. Simmons. Her voice wasn't sharp like before, it was softer, almost hesitant. "Excuse me," she called. Emma turned to face her, staying calm but clearly on guard. "Yes, Mrs. Simmons?" I started walking toward them, but hung back, letting Emma handle it. "I owe you an apology," Simmons said, her tone stripped of its usual edge. "Not just for what happened that day, but for everything." Emma stayed quiet, waiting. "I've been taking the disability training the HOA required," she went on. "I also got some tough medical news." Something in her voice made me stop in my tracks. She didn't sound like the woman who once shoved my daughter. "My doctor says I have early-onset Parkinson's," she said quietly. "In a few years, I might need help too." Emma's face softened. "I'm sorry to hear that." Simmons nodded and glanced over at Caroline. "Is this your friend?" "Yes," Emma said. "This is Caroline. She just moved into the blue house on Maple Court." Surprisingly, Mrs. Simmons smiled. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said to Caroline. "You've already met our best resident." Caroline looked a little puzzled, but Emma blushed at the compliment. "The paths look much better now," Simmons added. "Your committee's doing great work." Then, just like that, she rolled up the window and drove off, leaving both girls watching after her, a bit stunned. Later, Emma told me what had happened. "Do you think she really changed, Dad?" I thought about it before answering. "Sometimes life gives people a new perspective," I said. "It's easier to understand someone else when you realize you might be in their shoes someday." Emma nodded. "It's kind of sad that it took a diagnosis to make her care." "Yeah," I agreed. "But at least she got there." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I'm still angry about what she did, but I'm also glad she might finally understand." 6 months after that awful day, our community held a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a brand-new accessible playground, the first of its kind in our county. Emma gave a short speech that left more than a few eyes misty. "Differences aren't bad," she said with Duke sitting tall beside her. "They're just different paths to the same place, belonging." As folks started heading toward the food tables, I noticed Mrs. Simmons standing off to the side, watching quietly. The kids were laughing and running around, and I saw Mrs. Simmons standing off to the side, quietly watching them play. Her hand trembled a little as she brushed her hair out of her face, a subtle sign of her condition. Emma noticed it too. After a moment of thought, she stepped toward the woman who had once bullied her. "Would you like to come have some lemonade with us, Mrs. Simmons?" she asked. Mrs. Simmons looked honestly shocked. "After everything I did, why would you want me there?" Emma adjusted Duke's service vest, a little habit she had when she was collecting her thoughts. "Because carrying around anger is exhausting," she said gently. "And because someday, you might need someone to show you a little kindness when you're struggling. So think of this as practice, for both of us." Something shifted in Mrs. Simmons' face right then. The stiffness melted away, and for the first time, I saw something softer, something human. "I'd like that," she said. "Thank you." The two of them walked toward the drink table together, Emma leading, Mrs. Simmons following. I didn't move. I just stood there, heart full. My daughter, who had every right to be angry, was choosing something harder: compassion. The woman who once cornered her and shoved her against a gate was now being gently led, not out of pity, and not because she deserved it, but because Emma understood something even years in law enforcement hadn't always taught me. Justice without mercy leaves everyone hurting. That day, I realized something that stopped me in my tracks. Emma wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was also my teacher. My job had given me authority, the power to punish. But Emma, she was showing me something deeper: the power to heal. The same woman who had caused us so much pain was now facing her own hard road. And my daughter, strong and kind, was lighting the way, not because she forgot the past, but because she chose to hold on to her humanity. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't to win the fight. It's to reach out your hand after the fight is over. And sometimes the most powerful kind of justice doesn't come from punishment, but from change. Real change. The kind that transforms not just the person who hurt you, but the community that once stood by and let it happen. As I watched Emma laughing with neighbors, some of the same people who had stayed silent while she was being mistreated, I realized something even greater than justice had been achieved. We had made change. Not just in policies or ramps or rules, but in people's hearts. The next day, I found Emma sitting on the porch, a notebook in her lap. Duke was curled at her feet, his golden fur glowing in the sunlight. "What are you working on?" I asked, taking a seat beside her. "A buddy system," she said, flipping the notebook toward me. "For new kids with disabilities who move here, so they always have someone who gets it." I smiled, stunned once again by how far we'd come from that awful day. "That's a great idea." "Oh, Mrs. Simmons is helping," Emma added, like it was nothing. That caught me off guard. "Really? What's that like, working with her?" Emma shrugged, thoughtful. Her hands shake more now. "Yesterday she couldn't open her water bottle during our meeting." She paused. I opened it for her. Nobody made a big deal out of it. That's how it should be when someone needs help. And right there, sitting next to my daughter, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. The woman who had once made Emma feel small and unwelcome was now coming face to face with her own fragility. And Emma? Instead of feeling satisfaction in that shift, she was quietly teaching her what a real community looks like. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice tight with emotion. Emma gave me a quiet smile. "I learned from the best." But we both knew that wasn't true. When it came to this, she had always been the teacher. While I had wanted justice to come through force and consequence, she had found something far greater: justice through compassion. The same gate where she'd once been pinned now stood transformed, covered in a bright, beautiful display of handprints. A community art project. And among them, side by side, were two handprints. One belonged to my daughter, the other to the woman who had once hurt her. Beneath them, in Emma's handwriting, were the words: "Different paths, same community."